My grandson turns 5 years old next Saturday, and I almost missed it because of a man I tried, for 2 long years, to call my son. Let me tell you what happened. My name is Gerald. I'm 68 years old, retired after 31 years of teaching high school history in Columbus, Ohio. My wife, Carol, passed 3 years ago from a heart condition that none of us saw coming. She was the kind of woman who remembered every birthday, sent handwritten cards, kept a calendar on the fridge with every grandchild's name circled in red marker. When she died, I promised myself I would carry that torch for her. I would be the grandfather she always dreamed I'd be. Steady, present, reliable. I have one daughter. Her name is Rachel. She's 34, bright, kind-hearted, the kind of person who cries at commercials and volunteers at the food pantry twice a month. I raised her mostly right. She married a man named Derek when she was 29, and I stood at that wedding and shook his hand and told him he was getting the best person I'd ever known. I meant every word. I'm not sure Derek ever meant much of anything he said to me. The first year of their marriage was fine. I'd drive up from Columbus to their place in Westerville every few weeks, bring groceries, fix whatever needed fixing around the house. Rachel and Derek had their son, my grandson Tommy, about a year into the marriage. I was in that hospital waiting room for 11 hours. When the nurse brought Tommy out and I held him for the first time, I understood completely what Carol used to mean when she'd say that grandchildren were the reward for not strangling your teenagers. That tiny boy looked up at me, and I felt something shift in my chest. Like a door I didn't know was closed had swung wide open. I showed up for everything. First steps, first haircut, every Sunday dinner I could manage. I drove 40 minutes each way without thinking twice. I wasn't one of those grandfathers who sent a check on Christmas and called it involvement. I was there, physically, consistently, every chance I got. Derek tolerated me in the beginning. I say tolerated because that's the honest word for it. He'd shake my hand at the door, pour himself a drink, and disappear into the back room while Rachel and I talked. He never asked me about my life, never remembered anything I'd shared with him. Once I mentioned I'd been to a Reds game, and 3 weeks later he asked me if I followed baseball. Small things, but they added up. The first real warning sign came about 18 months into their marriage. I'd planned a Saturday with Tommy, just the two of us, a trip to the Columbus Zoo, something Carol and I used to do with Rachel when she was small. I'd mentioned it to Rachel 2 weeks ahead. She'd said yes. I showed up at 9 in the morning with a little backpack full of snacks and a stuffed elephant I'd found at a shop downtown. Derek answered the door in his bathrobe. He said Tommy wasn't going anywhere that day. Said they had plans. He didn't look at me when he said it. He was scrolling on his phone. I stood on the porch holding that stuffed elephant and asked if Rachel had mentioned the zoo trip. He shrugged and said plans change. I went back to my car and sat there for about 5 minutes before I drove home. I told myself it was a miscommunication. People have bad mornings. I was raised to give the benefit of the doubt, and I gave it, again and again. But the miscommunications kept happening. Canceled visits, unanswered texts. Rachel would confirm a plan, and then I'd arrive, and Derek would come to the door with some excuse. Tommy had a cold. Derek had work stuff. The timing wasn't good. Once, I stood at their front door for 3 full minutes ringing the bell. I could hear the television inside. Nobody came. Rachel started calling me separately, quietly, always while Derek was out. She'd apologize in this whispered, careful voice that broke my heart because I knew what it meant. She was managing him, trying to keep both sides calm. I've seen that pattern before in my years of teaching kids who learn to navigate unstable home situations by becoming expert peacekeepers. I didn't say any of that to Rachel. I just told her I loved her and to let me know when a good time was. The demand came on a Tuesday evening in November, about 2 years into their marriage. Tommy had just turned 3. Rachel had called me that afternoon to set up a Thanksgiving visit, nothing fancy. Just me coming over for dinner, maybe staying the night so I could be there when Tommy woke up. She sounded hopeful. We'd had a few decent months and I thought maybe things were leveling out. Derek called me that evening. He never called me. I remember looking at my phone and seeing his name and feeling a cold feeling in my stomach before I even answered. He didn't bother with small talk. He told me that if I wanted to continue spending time with Tommy, there were going to be some new arrangements. He said his time was valuable. He said that every visit I made required him to adjust his schedule, and that he felt that adjustment deserved compensation. He used the word compensation. I remember it exactly because I had to sit down when he said it. He wanted $300 per visit, not per month. Per visit. I asked him to repeat himself because I was certain I had misheard. He repeated it. Same words. Same flat tone. $300 each time I wanted to see my grandson. I didn't yell. I'm not a yelling man. Carol used to say my superpower was that I could be absolutely furious and still sound like I was discussing the weather. I told Derek I heard him clearly and that I'd be in touch. Then I hung up and I sat in my kitchen in the dark for a long time. I want to be honest about what I felt that night. It wasn't just anger, though there was plenty of that. It was grief. Real, heavy grief. Not for myself, I've lived long enough to handle disappointment. It was grief for Tommy. That little boy had no idea his father was using him as leverage. He was 3 years old and somebody had put a price tag on his grandfather. I called my brother Walter the next morning. Walter is 71, a retired attorney, sharp as ever. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is unusual for Walter. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Gerald, do you know what grandparent visitation rights are?" I said I'd heard the term but didn't know the details. He explained. In Ohio, under certain circumstances, a grandparent can petition a court for visitation rights if access to a grandchild is being unreasonably denied. It's not automatic. It's not simple. But it exists. The law sees the relationship between a grandparent and grandchild as something worth protecting when it clearly serves the child's well-being. I wrote down everything Walter told me. Then I called a family law attorney named Patricia in Columbus, whom Walter had recommended. I met with her the following week. I brought documentation texts, dates, a written account of every canceled visit, every excuse, every incident going back 2 years. Patricia looked through it carefully and told me I had a reasonable case, given the documented pattern and the clear bond Tommy and I had established. She also told me something else. She said the strongest position I could be in was one where I had made every reasonable attempt to maintain the relationship and had been systematically blocked. She said to keep records of everything going forward. Every call, every text, every door that didn't open. I went home and I kept records. I also kept showing up. That part was important to me. I didn't vanish, didn't withdraw, didn't give Derek the satisfaction of watching me walk away. Every week or two, I would send a text to Rachel letting her know I was thinking of them and available whenever they wanted a visit. I sent Tommy cards in the mail, birthday cards, just because cards with little drawings of animals that Carol used to make and that I'd tried to learn from her. I documented every one. December came. I sent a Christmas card with a photo of me and Tommy from the zoo trip we'd managed to take the previous spring, one of the last good visits before things got worse. Inside the card, I included a small gift card for Tommy, nothing extravagant. I didn't hear back. January came. I called Rachel on her birthday. She answered this time, sounded tired and thin-voiced. We talked for about 12 minutes. She said things were fine. I told her I loved her. I didn't mention Derek or the $300. Patricia had advised me to keep direct confrontation out of my conversations with Rachel for now. February came. Tommy's 3.5 birthday, which I had started privately marking in my own calendar the way Carol used to, just to have a reason to send something. I mailed a little card with a sticker sheet inside. No response. March. A text from Rachel. Dad, I'm sorry things have been complicated. I hope you know I love you. Nothing more. I wrote back that I loved her and that I was there whenever she needed me. I sat on what I really wanted to say. Then April came, and everything shifted. Tommy's 4th birthday was April 9th. I had put it in my calendar 11 months before. I'd been planning quietly for months a wooden train set, handmade, that I'd found at a craft fair in February. The man who made it was a retired carpenter who did them custom. I'd had Tommy's name carved into the engine. Cost me more than I'll admit, but I kept thinking about the look on that boy's face the first time I showed him my old Lionel set in my basement. His eyes went wide like I'd opened a door to another world. I texted Rachel in March asking about the birthday. She didn't respond for 4 days. When she did, she said she'd let me know the plan closer to the date. Closer to the date, I heard nothing. On April 7th, 2 days before Tommy's birthday, I called Rachel directly. It went to voicemail. I left a message calm. No pressure, just asking if there was a plan, and if I could bring Tommy's gift over. April 8th. Nothing. April 9th, Tommy's birthday, I drove to Westerville. I brought the train set, wrapped in brown paper with a blue ribbon because Carol always said blue was a boy's color, and old habits die hard. I drove 40 minutes and I parked outside their house and I sat there for a moment, took a breath, and walked up to the front door. Derek answered. He was dressed like he was heading out somewhere. Behind him, through the hallway, I could see balloons, blue and yellow. Tommy's favorites. I could hear kids' voices. Laughter. The particular chaos of a small birthday party already underway. Derek stepped outside and closed the door behind him. He looked at me the way you'd look at someone who'd shown up at the wrong address. He said, "You weren't invited, Gerald." I told him I was Tommy's grandfather, and I'd brought a gift for his birthday. He said Tommy had plenty of gifts. He said this wasn't a good time. He used his body to block the door the way people do when they want to make a point without technically touching you. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "All right, Derek. I'll leave the gift." I walked back to my car. I opened the trunk, and I took out the box. But it wasn't just the train set. While I was packing up that morning, I had added something to the box. A plain manila envelope, sealed, with Derek's name written on it in my handwriting. Inside that envelope was a legal document, a formal notice that my attorney, Patricia, had prepared. It stated that I had retained legal counsel and was initiating a consultation regarding grandparent visitation rights in the state of Ohio, citing a documented pattern of interference with an established grandparent-grandchild relationship. It listed dates. It listed incidents. It was not aggressive. It was factual, professional, and thorough. Patricia had told me she didn't know if we'd ever need to file anything formally. She said sometimes the letter alone changes the calculation. I walked back to the front door. Derek was standing there watching me with his arms crossed. I held out the box and told him I'd like him to give this to Tommy. It was his birthday gift from his grandfather. I said there was also something inside for Derek that he might want to look at when he had a moment. He took the box without a word. I turned around and walked back to my car. I drove to a diner about 2 miles away. I ordered coffee and a piece of pie cherry, Carol's favorite, and I sat at the window table and I waited. 47 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Rachel. Her voice was shaking. She said, "Dad, what is this?" I told her it was something she should have known about a long time ago. I told her that her husband had been systematically blocking my access to Tommy for over 2 years, that he had demanded money from me in exchange for visits with my own grandson, and that I had been quietly documenting everything, with the help of a family law attorney. Silence on the line. Then, "He asked you for money?" She didn't know. I hadn't been sure. But in that moment I understood clearly Rachel hadn't known about the $300. Derek had been running this operation without telling her. I don't know what he planned to do with the money if I'd paid. Maybe he never thought I'd find out. Maybe he just wanted to drive me away. And the money demand was the weapon he chose. Rachel started crying. Not politely, really crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and pressurized. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't understood how bad it had gotten. She said she'd been so focused on keeping the peace that she hadn't asked the right questions. I told her I wasn't calling to put her in the middle. I told her I loved her, and I loved Tommy, and that I had done this quietly and carefully because I wanted her to have the full picture, not a version of it filtered through Derek. She asked if she could come see me. I said my door was always open. That night, Rachel showed up at my house in Columbus with Tommy in his car seat. She had a bag over her shoulder, and her eyes were red. Tommy ran in ahead of her and grabbed me around the knees and said, "Grandpa the way." Only a 4-year-old can say it like it's the most important word in the English language. We sat in my kitchen, all 3 of us, eating cereal because it was 8 o'clock at night and nobody had eaten dinner. Tommy discovered Carol's old toy basket in the living room and spent an hour hauling things out and showing them to us one by one, while Rachel and I talked quietly at the table. She told me the marriage had been difficult for a long time. Derek controlled the finances, monitored her phone, told her which friends were acceptable. She had been minimizing it even to herself, the way people do when they're inside something that's getting smaller around them. The letter in the box had cracked something open. I told her I wasn't going to tell her what to do. She was 34 years old, and she knew her situation better than I did. What I told her was that my house had 2 empty bedrooms, a fenced backyard, and a grandfather who would drive Tommy to preschool every morning if that's what was needed. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "I always wondered why you never pushed harder, Dad. Why you kept being so calm about everything." I told her Carol taught me that calm water cuts the deepest channels. You don't have to crash. You just have to keep moving. Rachel and Tommy stayed at my house for 3 nights. On the second morning, Tommy and I set up the wooden train set on the living room floor. The little engine with his name on it went around a figure-8 track while he made train sounds with his mouth, and I sat in Carol's old chair and watched him, and felt something in my chest that I don't have a word for. Relief is part of it. Gratitude is part of it, but mostly it was just the sensation of a door that had been almost closed creaking back open. Rachel filed for divorce 6 weeks later. Derek contested it at first, the way people do when they're used to controlling things. But Patricia connected Rachel with a family law colleague who helped her navigate it. The documented history of financial control and the visitation interference were part of the record. The court process took most of that year. I won't pretend it was easy for Rachel. It wasn't. She had hard nights and uncertain weeks and moments where she questioned herself the way people always do when they're dismantling something they built, even something that was hurting them. But I was there, 40 minutes away, then across town. Then when Rachel found an apartment closer to me 12 minutes door to door. Tommy's 5th birthday is next Saturday. Rachel is throwing him a party at the park, the one with the big climbing structure he's been obsessed with since last fall. She's invited her friends, some of the neighbors, a few kids from his preschool. Tommy has already told me, in exhaustive detail, that he wants a dinosaur cake with a volcano that actually explodes, which I've been informed is a reasonable request for a 5-year-old. I'm bringing the cake. Rachel found a bakery that does a baking soda volcano on top, which is close enough. I've been thinking a lot lately about what Derek thought was going to happen. I think he expected me to either pay the money or disappear. I think he'd looked at a 68-year-old retired school teacher with a 40-minute drive and decided I was someone who could be managed, someone who would choose the easy road. He didn't know that Walter was a retired attorney. He didn't know I had 2 years of documented evidence in a folder in my filing cabinet. He didn't know that Carol had spent 31 years of marriage teaching me that patience and preparation are the same thing, just in different clothes. And he certainly didn't know what was in that envelope. I drove home from that diner with cherry pie in my stomach and my phone quiet in my pocket, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not victory, exactly. More like solid ground underfoot, like I'd been walking on ice for 2 years, and had finally stepped back onto something that held. Next Saturday, Tommy is going to run at me across that park the way small children run arms out, full speed, no brakes. And I'm going to catch him the way grandfathers do, like it's the easiest thing in the world, like I wasn't one sealed envelope away from missing this entirely. Carol would have loved this story. She would have said I took the long way around. She would have been right. But she also would have been there at the park with her camera and her red-circled calendar, watching that little boy blow out 5 candles on a volcano cake. And she would have been smiling. I'm going to smile for both of us.